Hello there. Thank you so much for joining us. This is News Channel Nebraska. My name's Eric McKay. Let's take a look at our top headlines today. A multi-unit dwelling in Norfolk suffered major damage after a fire Monday morning. It happened at a home at the corner of 12th and Phillip in Norfolk, just across the street from Grant Elementary School. There's no word yet on what caused the fire, but firefighters appear to be focusing their efforts on the second story of the structure. There's been no word on any injuries. Law enforcement blocked both 12th and Phillip in both directions near the scene, which caused some disruption as parents tried to drop off their kids at school. School officials told News Channel Nebraska everyone was able to get to class okay. Thousands of Democrats converging on Chicago this week for the Democratic National Convention, which will see Vice President Kamala Harris officially become the party's nominee for president. Michael Yoshida has more from Chicago.
Thank you all very much. How are you doing?
Democrats rallying around the Harris-Walz campaign as the Democratic National Convention kicks off this week in Chicago. Vice President Kamala Harris set to formally accept her party's nomination for president. The DNC capping off a whirlwind month for Harris as she quickly rallied support following President Joe Biden's decision to stop his re-election campaign.
Phew. It was just like a hurricane. One state party delegation after another, they met and they made an endorsement of Harris. So she had this wrapped up pretty quickly.
President Joe Biden is set to headline Monday's opening night.
This is a man who's accomplished more in 3.5 years than most presidents get done in 8. So we're going to see a celebration of him. We're also going to see how Kamala Harris has brought the party together.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe. Thank you.
Biden is expected to lay out his argument for electing Harris, describe all the two have achieved together, and stress the need to defeat former President Donald Trump.
There is a danger on the horizon here, and that is that Donald Trump might become president again, and it's a danger that a majority of Americans will reject. But they need to know that who they're voting for is somebody that they can be excited and electrified by.
In Chicago, I'm Michael Yoshida reporting.
Meanwhile, vice presidential candidate Tim Walz made a stop on Saturday in Omaha, playing up his Nebraska roots in his first trip back home since becoming the VP candidate. The event began at the Astro Theater in La Vista. Walz and a handful of other candidates spoke at the rally Saturday. The West Point-born Valentine native grad of Chadron State College spoke on what he said are his Nebraska values, playing up his past living in the state.
But it was my students and my players who really inspired me to run for office. They saw in me what I was hoping to instill in them, a commitment to the common good and a belief that one person truly can make a difference, each and every one of us.
The Nebraska Democratic Party says it's planning a watch party event for the DNC and Alliance this week. That coincides with Republican Vice President J.D. Vance visiting Omaha this week for a private fundraiser hosted by the Ricketts family. After a somewhat combative primary season, Nebraska's Republican Party presenting a unified front ahead of the general election. The Nebraska GOP party adopted a resolution over the weekend consolidating support across the party. A second resolution passed to endorse all 5 federal congressional officials. That's a change for the GOP, who notably backed Republican challengers to Senators Pete Ricketts and Deb Fischer and Representatives Mike Flood, Don Bacon, and Adrian Smith. But all 5 easily won their primary races in May. GOP Chairman Eric Underwood said in a statement it's important for the party to respect the voice of the voters. House Republicans, meanwhile, have released their initial impeachment inquiry report into President Joe Biden. The year-long probe by Republicans stopped short of alleging any criminal wrongdoing by the president over his son Hunter Biden's business dealings. Instead, the almost 300-page report out Monday ahead of the Democratic National Convention covers familiar ground. It's asserting the Biden family traded on its brand in business ventures in corrupt ways that, in their words, rise to the Constitution's high bar for impeachment. But with Biden no longer running for re-election, next steps are highly uncertain. The White House has dismissed House impeachment inquiry as a stunt and encouraged House Republicans to move on. After his recent resignation, former University of Florida president and former Nebraska Senator Ben Sasse facing scrutiny over decisions he made prior to calling it quits. A student-run newspaper in Florida found Sasse gave consulting contracts and high-paying jobs to former members of his U.S. Senate staff and Republican allies. This caused Governor Ron DeSantis and Florida's chief financial officer to call on the system's board of governors to investigate. As president, the paper alleges 6 former staffers and 2 Republican officials were given salaries well above comparable positions, with most not even moving to Gainesville, but working remotely. Sasse spent just over $17 million in his first year compared to $5.6 million spent by his predecessor. Now, Sasse responded in a statement saying the positions were needed for new satellite campuses in Florida and called the payments appropriate. Sasse resigned from his role as president on July 31st. An upcoming ballot initiative will be deciding the fate of upgrades to a police station in northeast Nebraska, and their chief of police says they need to happen now. Luke Stera has more.
Chief of Police Don Miller's experience runs deep with the Norfolk Police Division, having been with the department since 1990. But he says in those years, the building the police call home has not seen major changes.
Our building was built in 1986. We moved into it in 1987. Since that time frame, we have done, other than some dispatch renovations, virtually nothing to the building since that time.
Norfolk City Council recently approved a ballot initiative for the upcoming election, allowing voters to decide on a half-cent sales tax increase. This tax would fund much-needed renovations at the station.
Right now, we have people literally working in hallways, and it's not an efficient way to do work when you have to step aside every time somebody comes through.
That sales tax would bring in roughly $16 million. Miller says about $11 million would cover the renovations to the station, with $5 million going to the streets department.
That money will go to expedite some street improvements. There's nothing else on the ballot. It's for the police department, and then what's left goes to the streets.
If the initiative doesn't pass, Miller warns that problems like poor morale, cramped conditions, and safety concerns will persist.
This is a need. This has to happen this year. Nobody likes to pay taxes, but we also can't expect our staff to work in this environment.
Norfolk Police plan to host at least 2 more open houses before November and invite all local residents to attend. If approved by voters, ground could break on the renovations as early as April or May of 2025. Reporting for News Channel Nebraska, this is Luke Stera.
Over 167,000 pounds of frozen chicken being recalled over possible metal contamination. The voluntary recall includes 22-ounce bags of Purdue and ButcherBox organic chicken breast nuggets and 29-ounce bags of regular chicken breast tenders. A thin strand of metal wire was found during the manufacturing process. That's according to a Purdue representative. According to the USDA, the products have a best-by date of March 23rd of next year. The products were shipped all over the country to retailers and sold online. There have been no reports as of yet of any reactions. The Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services has seen a $15 million cut to its behavioral health division this year, and more cuts are being proposed. DHHS now faces a $25 million cut to help fund property tax relief. Behavioral health specialists in Norfolk provide short-term residential treatment for substance use disorders. BHS officials say the COVID pandemic may have contributed to the mistaken assumption that the unspent funding wasn't needed.
Really why a lot of places where people weren't able to pull down their funding and use it, it wasn't because the demand wasn't there. It's because trying to find staff the last 4 to 5 years, it was a difficult period.
Brodeur says their residential program in Norfolk only recently became fully staffed for the first time in 4 years.
We now have the staff to be at 58 beds and are full. We receive over 100 referrals a month for those 58 beds. So, we have the staffing now to serve the clients. The clients are there.
Broder says some Nebraska agencies have spent years rebuilding their staff following the pandemic. He says they've had to compete with national companies who can pay more and allow people to work remotely. He adds employers, particularly in smaller communities, have had to increase wages and work harder to recruit and retain staff. And lawmakers across the U.S. calling for tech companies to do more to help stop the spread of non-consensual explicit images on their sites. This as artificial intelligence makes it easier to generate those images. Lee Waldman has the details.
Once that imagery is online, it can be incredibly difficult to get it back.
The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children started its Take It Down program in December 2022 after speaking with victims of online child pornography and their families.
They want to be able to anonymously report and get the content down.
The Take It Down program does just that, but John Sheehan says the prevalence of artificial intelligence creating non-consensual nude images is presenting new challenges.
Individuals can take imagery of an individual, whether that be a minor or an adult, can run it through what's often referred to as a nudify app. So you could take a clothed image, turn it into a nude or pornographic image, and distribute it online.
In January, Taylor Swift was the subject of headlines when AI-generated explicit images of her started circulating online. Not just mega superstars can fall victim. Anna McAdams' daughter, Elliston Berry, was just 14 when she became a target of non-consensual imagery using AI by a classmate.
It really put her in a shell for a while. I mean, she was scared and afraid to approach people, which is just not my child.
They struggled to get accountability through the school district and law enforcement and are also fighting for regulations on explicit AI images. This month, a group of lawmakers sent a letter to nearly a dozen firms, including Google, X, and Discord, asking the tech companies to do their part.
This is something we can all agree on. How do we protect our children?
In New York, I'm Lee Waldman reporting.
And you can stay up to date with the very latest by following us online. Head to newschannelnebraska.com and click on the News tab there. You can also follow us on X, like us on Facebook and Instagram as well. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day. You're watching News Channel Nebraska.